I sat cross-legged on the polished hardwood floor of my parents' Portland living room, scraps of wrapping paper scattered around me, the artificial pine scent from the plastic Christmas tree heavy in the air. Strings of twinkling lights reflected off every shiny surface, making the room look festive, almost magical, except inside I felt absolutely hollow. Before we dive into true revenge stories, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hearing from people around the world makes these stories even more powerful and reminds us how connected we all are. Across from me, my younger sister Chelsea twirled a brand new set of BMW keys between her manicured fingers, the metal flashing like diamonds under the lights. She squealed, bouncing on her toes like a teenager who just passed her driving test, not a 32-year-old woman. Dad stood behind her, his grin wide and unrestrained, the picture of paternal pride. Mom clutched her hands under her chin, eyes glistening as if she were witnessing a miracle. Outside the window, parked proudly in the driveway, sat a glossy white BMW, so new the registration sticker was still on the windshield. Tied across the hood was a massive red bow, flashy, expensive, ridiculous. That bow alone probably cost more than my entire pile of Christmas presents combined. Meanwhile, sitting in my lap was a plastic piggy bank. Brightly colored, shaped like a cartoon character I hadn't thought about since I was 7. The cheap kind you find in a dollar store bin. The price tag still clung to the bottom, $1.99. I turned it over in my hands, its hollow body rattling lightly. It felt flimsy, like it could crack with one careless squeeze. "Go ahead, open it," Mom urged, her voice filled with excitement. My fingers hesitated before pulling the little rubber stopper. Out fluttered 2 crisp $1 bills. That was it. Dad leaned back in his recliner, waving a hand dismissively as if it were nothing more than pocket change. "It's the start of your future home fund, honey. You've always been so good with money, not like some people." He winked at Chelsea. Laughter rippled through the room. Chelsea leaned across the couch toward me, her perfume heavy and suffocating. "Don't worry, sis. I'll drive you around whenever you need. That little Toyota of yours must be on its last legs by now." Her words landed like a knife twist. She had no idea. Or maybe she did. My Toyota, the car I'd worked years to pay off, the one that carried me through college classes, late-night commutes and mountain passes in winter storms, wasn't glamorous, but it was reliable. More reliable than any relationship in that house. The whole scene unfolded like a play I had watched too many times, my parents fawning over Chelsea, showering her with extravagant gifts while tossing me something half-hearted, more insult than present. And always with the same excuse, "You're independent. You don't need as much." Flashes of memory hit me like waves. Chelsea's 5th birthday party with pony rides and a 3-tier castle cake, while my 6th birthday was celebrated with a store-bought sheet cake and paper streamers from the bargain aisle. My high school graduation, where I delivered the valedictorian speech to a sea of strangers because my family's seats sat empty. They were across town at one of Chelsea's volleyball games. My college years, when I worked 25 hours a week to cover tuition, while Chelsea found herself in Europe on my parents' dime. Every single memory carried the same message over and over: Chelsea mattered more. And yet, stupidly, I had driven 7 hours down from Seattle, believing maybe, just maybe, this Christmas would be different. I had rehearsed my news all the way down I-5, planning how I'd finally tell them I'd earned a promotion to senior structural engineer. I wanted to see their faces light up with pride, to hear for once that they were proud of me. But that moment never came. It was always going to be Chelsea. Always her. The laughter around the Christmas tree grew louder, but in my head, everything went quiet. My chest tightened like concrete hardening around my lungs. I stared at the 2 limp dollar bills lying on the glass coffee table. The piggy bank made a hollow thud as I set it down. That sound, that emptiness, summed up 34 years of my life. "Excuse me," I muttered, forcing my voice not to shake. "I need to use the bathroom." I climbed the stairs past the wall of family photos. Frame after frame, Chelsea's face shone from the center. Me, I was either cropped at the edge or missing altogether. Those photos weren't just decoration. They were evidence proof of a lifetime spent in the shadows. Inside the bathroom, I locked the door and leaned against the sink. The mirror reflected a face too calm, too dry. Not a single tear came through. My chest ached like someone pressing a knee against my sternum. I realized I wasn't even shocked anymore. I was just finished. That Christmas morning wasn't a tragedy. It was confirmation, proof of what I had always been worth to them. Exactly $2. The bathroom door clicked shut behind me, the sound sharp in the silence. I twisted the lock, not because I feared interruption, but because I needed one small square of space that belonged only to me. The mirror over the sink reflected a face that seemed foreign dry eyes, lips pressed into a tight line, shoulders tense. People always imagine heartbreak as messy, full of sobbing and crumpled tissues. Mine was quieter. My chest burned like someone had poured concrete into my ribcage, each breath heavier than the last. I gripped the marble countertop, forcing myself to inhale, exhale, inhale, again. Behind the door, laughter drifted upward, Chelsea's high-pitched squeals as she planned road trips in her shiny new BMW. The sound was muffled, but each note landed like a hammer striking at 34 years of memories I had tried so hard to bury. They came back all at once. If you're still watching, comment 1, so I know you're still with me. My 5th birthday. Chelsea's party had ponies in the yard, a magician, 30 neighborhood kids running wild with paper crowns. Mine the following year, a grocery store sheet cake, 2 classmates whose moms could give me a ride, and paper hats bought from the clearance bin. High school graduation, I had been valedictorian, a speech polished for weeks. The camera panned across the bleachers, catching rows of proud families waving at their kids. My family's seats sat empty. Later, Dad said they had to take Chelsea to a volleyball game. "We'll watch the recording," Mom promised, pressing the VHS tape into my hands. That tape gathered dust on my dresser until the day I left for college. College itself was another battlefield. I worked 25 hours a week between the bookstore and the dining hall, just to cover what scholarships didn't. My student loans piled higher each semester. Meanwhile, Chelsea found herself on a tour through Europe. Rome, Paris, Amsterdam, all bankrolled by the very parents who told me, "You'll be fine, you've always been independent." Independent. Their favorite word. A code that really meant, you don't deserve help. I pressed my palms harder into the countertop, the chill of the stone grounding me. The memories spun like a cruel slideshow, each frame proving what I had always suspected. This wasn't about money or circumstance or timing. It was about value. To them, Chelsea was priceless. I was self-sufficient, so why waste resources? The piggy bank flashed in my mind again, the hollow plastic, the pathetic flutter of 2 lonely bills. That wasn't a gift. It was a verdict. A final reminder that in their eyes I was worth exactly $2. My breath caught, and for the first time in years, I admitted the thought I had always shoved down. Maybe they don't love me at all, not the way parents are supposed to. A sound escaped my throat, not quite a sob, not quite a laugh, something bitter in between. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to wash away the heat of shame rising in my skin. The water dripped down, pooling at my collarbone. I stared at the woman in the mirror and asked the question I had never dared. How much longer am I going to live like this? The house creaked under the weight of holiday decorations. Chelsea's voice floated up again, animated, alive, adored. My heart pounded with a strange mixture of fury and clarity. I wasn't powerless. I had choices. I had my Toyota downstairs, full tank of gas, my suitcase half packed with the clothes I'd brought from Seattle. For the first time, the idea of leaving wasn't terrifying, it was liberating. I dried my hands slowly, the towel rough against my skin, and whispered to my reflection, "You don't have to stay." The thought was so foreign, so radical it almost scared me, but it also felt like oxygen after years of drowning. That night, I would lie awake in my childhood bedroom, listening to Chelsea's laughter downstairs, the sound of my parents doting over her every word. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, the decision would crystallize. At 2:17 a.m., I would stop waiting for them to see me. I would choose myself. The old clock in the hallway ticked louder than usual that night, each second dragging like an anchor. I lay in my childhood bedroom staring at the ceiling, the glow of the Christmas lights from the yard leaking through the blinds. Downstairs, Chelsea's laughter floated up, light carefree, sweetened by the glow of her brand-new BMW. My parents' voices joined in warm and indulgent. It was the kind of family sound I had craved for decades, but it had never included me. I turned over, pulling the blanket tighter, but sleep refused to come. My mind replayed the piggy bank again and again, that hollow clatter when I dropped it on the glass table like an echo of my entire life. $2. That was the measure of me. At 1:30, the laughter quieted. At 2:00, the house finally fell silent. Still, I lay awake, chest tight, the decision forming like a storm front in my body. And then at 2:17 a.m., clarity struck. I couldn't stay not one more day, not one more hour. I swung my legs out of bed, the floorboards groaning under my weight. My suitcase sat by the door, half packed with the clothes I'd brought from Seattle. I added just a few more things: the stuffed bear my grandmother gave me when I was a child, the photo album from college, a small wooden box that held the blueprint of my first building design. The expensive gifts I had wrapped for my parents and Chelsea, those stayed neatly stacked under the tree. They had never been about gratitude anyway, only obligation. The air in the hallway was cold as I crept downstairs. Shadows stretched long and thin across the walls, the house unfamiliar in its silence. The kitchen clock glowed a steady green at 23. I paused at the counter, pulling the house key from my coat pocket. For a moment, I held it tight in my palm, feeling its weight. This little piece of metal had unlocked every door of my childhood. It had let me in after long days at school, after late shifts at the bookstore, after college breaks when I drove hours just to prove I still belonged here. But tonight, it felt heavy, useless. I set it down beside the coffee maker, flat against the counter, and stared at it one last time. My parents had made their choice. Now I was making mine. Outside, the December night slapped me with its chill. I dragged my suitcase across the porch wheels, bumping down the steps, then slid into my Toyota. The familiar scent of worn upholstery and coffee spilled on the floor mats comforted me more than anything inside that house ever had. The engine hummed to life with a reassuring growl. Streetlights blurred into watery halos as I steered through the sleeping neighborhood. By 300, the city lights of Portland shrank behind me, swallowed by darkness. My headlights carved a lonely path down the interstate. Snow flurries swirled, thickening into streaks that the wipers fought to keep clear. On the radio, Bing Crosby crooned about a white Christmas. My throat tightened and I reached out to turn the volume knob until his voice disappeared into static. In the silence, I whispered to the empty passenger seat, "Merry Christmas." The word cracked halfway out of my mouth. The irony burned. Through the southern outskirts of Portland, my Toyota's heater wheezed and coughed, struggling against the December cold. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, reminding myself this car had carried me faithfully for years across mountain passes, down rain-slick highways to job sites where no one else believed I belonged. Unlike the BMW in my parents' driveway, this car had earned its place in my life. At 3:42 a.m., my phone buzzed against the console. Mom's face lit up the screen. My breath hitched, but when I swiped to read the message, it wasn't, "Are you safe?" or "Please come home." It was, "Did you remember to pay the cabin's electric bill before you left Seattle? Chelsea needs it for her photo shoots." A bitter laugh escaped me. Even now, even in the middle of the night, my worth to them was measured in utility, what I could do, what I could pay for. Never who I was. I let the phone fall back into the console and pressed harder on the gas. Snow blurred into white ribbons rushing past my windows. Somewhere beyond the state line, the sun would rise, and with it, maybe a life where I was no longer the afterthought, no longer the dependable shadow. For now, though, I drove into the dark, a woman carrying little more than a suitcase, a battered Toyota, and a fragile but defiant truth. I would rather face an unknown road alone than spend one more day being worth only $2. By the time the Oregon sky began to pale, my eyelids felt like sandpaper. The Toyota's heater coughed lukewarm air, but my hands still shook on the steering wheel. Highway signs ticked down the miles like a slow drumbeat, and I realized I hadn't eaten since Christmas Eve dinner, if you could call picking at dry turkey while being ignored dinner. When the neon glow of a roadside diner appeared on the horizon, it looked less like a business and more like a rescue. The red sign buzzed faintly, the word open, flickering against the dawn. I pulled into the near-empty lot, gravel crunching under my tires. Inside, the warmth wrapped around me instantly. The air smelled of strong coffee, frying bacon, and something sweet on the griddle. My body sagged with relief. A few truckers sat hunched over their plates, ball caps pulled low, but otherwise the diner was quiet. I slid into a booth near the window, too tired to care that the vinyl seat was cracked. A woman in her 60s shuffled over, coffee pot in hand. Her hair was streaked with silver, tied back loosely, and her name tag read Gloria. "Rough night?" she asked, pouring coffee into the chipped mug in front of me. "Rough life," I muttered, before I could stop myself. The words sounded melodramatic, but they slipped out anyway. Gloria didn't laugh. She didn't scold. She just gave a slow, knowing nod. "Family or boyfriend?" I blinked. "Family." She set the pot down, sliding a laminated menu across the table. Her hand lingered on mine for the briefest moment, warm and steady. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Blood makes you related. Love and respect make you family." The words landed with the weight of scripture. I stared at her coffee mug halfway to my lips, as though she'd just cracked open a secret I'd been trying to solve for decades. "Special's good today," she added casually, as if she hadn't just rearranged the furniture in my soul. "Comes with extra bacon." My laugh came out shaky but real. "I'll take it." As she shuffled back toward the kitchen, I wrapped my hands around the steaming mug. The heat seeped into my frozen fingers, but it was Gloria's words that thawed something deeper. "Blood makes you related. Love and respect make you family." I thought about Chelsea, about my parents, about all the years I twisted myself into knots, trying to earn their approval with straight A's, promotions gifts they barely noticed. I thought of every time they had brushed me aside with that poisoned compliment, "You're so independent. You don't need us." What Gloria said made me realize the truth. They were related to me, yes, but family. Family doesn't hand one daughter a BMW and the other a $2 piggy bank. Family doesn't skip graduations or dismiss accomplishments or treat love like a competition. Family shows respect, and respect had been missing from my life for 34 years. The waitress returned, sliding a plate in front of me, eggs, sunny side up, hash browns, crisp and golden, 4 strips of bacon. The smell made my stomach growl. "Eat," she said firmly, like a grandmother giving an order. I obeyed, the first bite almost painful in its intensity. Hunger and exhaustion and relief tangled together, tears pricking my eyes before I could stop them. Gloria didn't hover, but every few minutes she drifted past, topping off my coffee, offering a smile that said more than words. By the time my plate was empty, something in me had shifted. I wasn't just running from my parents anymore, I was heading toward something else. A life where I could build my own family, one defined by love, respect, and choice. When I stood to pay, Gloria waved me off. "You look like you needed it more than I needed the cash." I hesitated, fumbling for words. "Thank you. For breakfast. And for what you said." She gave me that same slow nod. "You'll be all right, honey. Sometimes leaving's the bravest thing you can do." Outside, the sun was rising, streaking the sky with pink and gold. I slid back into my Toyota, the diner fading in the rearview mirror as I pulled back onto the highway. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in years, it felt like it might actually lead somewhere worth going. The highway stretched endlessly before me, a ribbon of gray cutting through pine forests dusted with snow. After the diner, the coffee kept me awake, but it couldn't quiet the buzzing in my chest. Gloria's words looped in my head. "Blood makes you related. Love and respect make you family." They felt like both a wound and a balm. The phone buzzed against the console again. I glanced down, expecting another barrage of missed calls from Mom or Dad, but this time it was a name that made my throat tighten. Monica Perez, my college roommate, my one constant friend through years of chaos. I hesitated, then tapped the screen. "Where are you?" she asked immediately. No small talk, no judgment, just concern. For a moment my voice didn't work. I cleared my throat. "Somewhere in Southern Oregon. What, Iris? It's Christmas morning. Why are you on the highway?" I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I couldn't stay. I left. At 2:17 this morning, I packed up and drove away. Silence hummed on the other end. Then Monica spoke, her voice steadier than mine. Good. You should have left years ago. My chest cracked open at her certainty. No one had ever said that to me. Not a single person had ever validated my pain without adding a but. But they're still your parents. But family is family. But you owe them. Monica cut through all of it. Where are you headed? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. Just south. Come to San Francisco. Stay with me. My instinct was to refuse. I can't impose on you. Stop, she interrupted, her voice sharp in that way only she could manage. You've spent your whole life being the helper, the fixer, the one who carries everyone else's weight. Let someone carry you for once. The words hit harder than any Christmas gift ever could. My throat tightened, eyes blurring as the snow streaked past. I don't know if I can. You can. And you will. Text me your location every hour until you get here. I'll make up the guest room. I laughed weakly, wiping my cheek with the back of my sleeve. You make it sound so easy. It is easy. You just don't know what it feels like yet. The call ended, but the warmth of her voice lingered. For the first time since leaving Portland, my shoulders dropped from their defensive hunch. The road still stretched long and lonely, but now it had a destination. By mid-morning, the California border came into view. The Welcome to California sign gleamed in the early light like a beacon. My phone screen showed 17 missed calls, 32 unread messages, all from Mom, Dad, and Chelsea. I scrolled through a few without opening them. Their words no longer felt like shackles. With one deliberate tap, I silenced their notifications. The quiet that followed was heavier than I expected, but not empty. It was space. Space to breathe, to rebuild, to imagine something different. My stomach growled again, reminding me I had eaten only once in the past 24 hours. A roadside billboard flashed, next exit. Food Gas Motel. I took it. The motel room was small, stale, and smelled faintly of bleach, but it was mine for the night. I collapsed onto the bed, staring at the ceiling fan that wobbled slightly as it spun. For the first time in years, I wasn't under my parents' roof. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for scraps of approval. I texted Monica Crossed into California, stopping for the night. Her reply came seconds later. Good, rest up. Tomorrow you'll be home. Home. The word sat heavy in my chest. Could a friend's apartment in San Francisco really be more of a home than the place I grew up? My parents would say no. They would insist home is where family is. But Gloria's voice whispered louder, love and respect make you family. And I realized something. Maybe I was finally on my way to finding mine. San Francisco greeted me with fog curling over the bay and the smell of salt carried on the wind. After nearly 10 hours on the road, my Toyota rattled into the Mission District tires, crunching over narrow streets lined with colorful murals and crowded coffee shops. It felt nothing like Portland, no heavy gray sky, no reminders of Christmas mornings gone wrong. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was arriving somewhere instead of running away. Monica's apartment sat on the third floor of a weathered building painted pale yellow with vines creeping up the brick. She rushed down the stairs before I even knocked, throwing her arms around me. You made it, she said into my shoulder, and for a second I let myself lean into the embrace. Her spare room was small but bright painted terracotta that glowed in the morning light. A clean bedspread, a dresser, even a vase of fresh flowers on the nightstand. Monica had thought of everything. It wasn't fancy, but it felt intentional. It felt like welcome. That first week blurred into exhaustion and adjustment. My phone buzzed constantly with voicemails from my parents, some pleading, some angry, some manipulative. I stopped listening. Instead, I threw myself into work. With Monica's encouragement, I sent an email to my company formally requesting a transfer to the San Francisco office. The approval came within 3 hours. Just like that, I had a job waiting for me. No family strings, no obligations, just my own reputation. Finding a place to live seemed impossible in this city, but Monica's book club friend Andrea managed a rent-controlled building. She met me with a smile and keys to a small 650-square-foot apartment. The kitchenette barely fit a refrigerator, but the west-facing windows caught golden sunlight every afternoon. I signed the lease that night, my hands trembling with both fear and pride. It wasn't just an apartment, it was proof I could start over. Monica, never one to let me hide behind work, insisted I needed more than paychecks and paperwork. "You need something that feeds your soul," she said, tugging me down the block one Saturday. We stopped in front of a community center painted sky blue, the words Art and Wellness stenciled across the windows. "Pottery class," I asked, skeptical. "Exactly. You've been holding yourself together like stone. Time to soften a little." I rolled my eyes but followed her inside. The room smelled of clay and paint. Tables lined with wheels were covered in splatters from years of creative hands. An older woman with silver hair and paint-stained overalls introduced herself as the instructor. "Don't force it," she told me as I sat at the wheel. "Let the clay tell you what it wants to be." At first, the lump of clay resisted every movement, collapsing into shapeless blobs under my unsteady fingers. But as I tried again, pressing gently, it began to rise, crooked, uneven, imperfect, but something. By the end of class, I held a small bowl with jagged edges. Ugly by most standards, yet entirely mine. I stared at it, heart pounding. For years, I'd been the dependable daughter, the strong one, the caretaker. My parents had shaped me into their idea of responsible, pressing me down every time I dared to rise. But here, with clay under my fingernails and my own uneven bowl in my hands, I realized I could create something new, something that didn't need their approval to exist. That night, I placed the bowl on the windowsill of my new apartment. The sunlight caught its ridges the next afternoon, and I smiled. Imperfect, yes, but real. Every day after I added a little more to my life, a futon, a desk, a lamp, each piece chosen by me for me. The emptiness of the apartment no longer felt lonely. It felt intentional, a clean slate. And slowly, I felt the weight of Portland, of piggy banks and BMW bows begin to lift. It was a Tuesday evening when my phone buzzed with an incoming video call. The name flashing across the screen made my stomach clench. Dad. I almost hit decline out of habit, but something in me hesitated. 7 weeks of therapy had given me new words, new strength. Maybe it was time to use them. I accepted. His face filled the screen, first red from anger or bourbon or both. "Where have you been?" he barked before I could say hello. "Your mother has been worried sick." Mom's face appeared beside his, dabbing at eyes that were strategically dry. "Iris, how could you do this to us? Leaving without a word. We've been frantic." The old guilt tugged at me, that familiar pull to apologize, to make it right. But Dr. Levine's voice echoed in my head. "Their reactions belong to them, not you." I straightened in my chair. "I'm in San Francisco," I said evenly. "I transferred offices. I needed space." Dad leaned closer to the camera, his jaw tightening. Space from what? From family? From responsibility? From growing up? My heart pounded, but my voice stayed steady. From feeling invisible. From being valued less than Chelsea. From trying to earn love that should have been given freely. The words landed like a slap. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "How can you say such hurtful things? We've always loved you both the same." "No," I replied softly, shaking my head. "You didn't, and I'm not responsible for pretending otherwise anymore." Dad slammed his palm against the table, the screen jolting. "This conversation is over until you're ready to apologize." A calm washed over me then, surprising in its strength. "Then I guess we're done talking." Before he could respond, I pressed end call. For a long moment, I sat in silence, staring at my reflection in the darkened phone screen. My hands trembled not from fear, but from release. For once I hadn't caved. I hadn't scrambled to fix their feelings. I had spoken my truth and survived. Over the next few days, messages trickled in from relatives. A cousin on Facebook sent a vague families need to stick together post. An aunt emailed about forgiveness being divine. Even Chelsea texted, acting suddenly like we were best friends. I could see the coordination behind it, like they were all enlisted to reel me back in. The old me would have folded. The new me read each message, then set my phone down without replying. At therapy that week, I told Dr. Levine what had happened. She smiled gently. "That's progress. You didn't let their narrative replace your own. Progress." The word tasted new but right. Later that night, Monica dropped by with takeout. We ate on the floor of my apartment, boxes of noodles spread across the rug. So, she said, twirling chow mein on her fork, "How'd it feel like taking off a backpack I didn't realize I'd been carrying for 34 years? She grinned. That's what boundaries feel like. Strange at first, then freeing. I thought of the piggy bank still sitting in my closet, filled now with crisp $2 bills, one for every week of freedom since Christmas. A reminder that worth isn't measured in scraps handed out by people who refuse to see you. For the first time, I felt something close to hope. The family narrative had always been that I was the reliable one, the responsible one, the daughter who didn't need attention. But maybe, just maybe, that story was over. And for once, I was the one holding the pen. The ivory envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days unopened, but impossible to ignore. Its calligraphy practically glowed under the lamplight. Vanessa Collins. My cousin's wedding. No +1. Just me expected to return to the fold unaccompanied, as though 7 months of silence and distance hadn't happened. When I finally slit the envelope open, a swirl of emotions spilled out along with the invitation. Part dread, part curiosity, part something I couldn't quite name. Weddings had always been family showcases, perfect smiles, glittering gifts, carefully curated appearances. I had been the reliable background character in those productions, fetching ice or adjusting centerpieces. This time, I wasn't sure who I would be. Dr. Levine asked me about it in our next session. "I think I'm going," I admitted, tracing the brass tacks along the armrest of her chair. Her eyebrows rose. "That's a change from last week." "On my terms," I added quickly. I booked a hotel downtown, 4 blocks from the venue. Dad already called twice, insisting I stay at their rental house. I let it go to voicemail. Her smile was small but approving. Sometimes the boundary is the message. Still, the pressure mounted. Uncle Pete called, his voice full of forced warmth. "Families need to stick together, Iris. Your parents are hurting. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Aunt Judith sent an email quoting scripture about forgiveness being divine. Even Vanessa's fiancé, whom I barely knew, reached out on Facebook with a message about healing old wounds for the sake of the wedding. It was coordinated textbook flying monkeys, as Dr. Levine called them. My parents hadn't changed. They had just outsourced the guilt trip. At night, I spread the seating chart Vanessa had accidentally included in a group email across my kitchen table. My name stared up at me, placed neatly between Mom and Dad, directly across from Chelsea. The tableau was perfect. Too perfect. They wanted me in the middle, surrounded, boxed in, playing the role I had always played. My throat tightened, but instead of shoving the paper away, I picked up my phone and dialed. "Vanessa." "It's Iris. I have a small request about the seating arrangements." She hesitated, clearly caught between family loyalty and wedding logistics. But in the end, she agreed. For once, my comfort mattered, if only because I asked for it. Meanwhile, Chelsea began texting more often than she had in years. "Can't wait to see you next weekend. We need sister time before the madness. Let's grab lunch, just the 2 of us." The old me would have leapt at the chance, desperate for crumbs of closeness. But the new me read the texts with a skeptical eye. Chelsea hadn't suddenly become sentimental. She wanted something what I couldn't yet guess. One evening, as I sat at my sewing table hemming the midnight blue dress I had commissioned, Monica dropped by with a bottle of wine. "That color's power," she said, running her fingers along the silk. "That's the point," I replied. "I'm not going there to reconcile. I'm going to stand in my own skin, to show them they don't define me anymore." She raised her glass. To boundaries. We clinked. The week before the wedding, anxiety curled in my stomach like smoke. Old habits whispered, "What if they're right? What if you're cruel for walking away?" But then I would glance at the piggy bank on my mantel, now filled with crisp $2 bills, one for each week of freedom. And I remembered they had chosen favoritism, diminishment dismissal. I had chosen survival. By the time my flight took off, San Francisco fog burning away below me, I touched the pendant Monica had given me. A smooth stone on a leather cord. "Strength isn't about not feeling fear," she had said. "It's about feeling it and walking forward anyway." The plane began its descent into Portland. My heart hammered, but my shoulders stayed square. This time I wasn't returning as the invisible daughter. This time, I was coming back on my own terms. The rehearsal dinner glowed golden under the chandeliers of Magnolia Gardens, all polished wood and polished smiles. Conversation floated in the air like champagne bubbles, but it faltered the moment I pushed open the heavy wooden door. Heads turned. My mother's hand flew to her throat. Dad's glass paused halfway to his lips. For 7 months I had been a ghost in their lives, a whispered rumor passed through relatives. Now here I stood alive, unbroken, wearing tailored black pants and an emerald silk blouse that caught the light with every movement. I felt their eyes trace the diamond studs in my ears, the heels that clicked against the floor with deliberate authority. I wasn't the invisible daughter tonight. I was someone they couldn't ignore. Chelsea broke the silence first. "You look amazing," she said, pulling me into a quick hug. Her smile was practiced, but not as bright as I remembered. Something in her posture had shifted, less arrogance, more strain. The gleaming BMW was gone, replaced with a Honda parked out front. "Thanks," I said, stepping back to reclaim my space. "How's the car treating you?" Her eyes darted away. "Traded it in. More practical, you know." I nodded but didn't press. For once, her choices weren't my responsibility to question or fix. Around us, conversation cautiously resumed, though I caught relatives sneaking glances my way. Cousin Tara leaned close with a whisper. "Your parents are selling the house. They say medical bills, but everyone knows they've been floating Chelsea for years." Reality finally caught up. The words should have stung, but instead they settled like confirmation of what I'd always known. Favoritism had a cost, and they were finally paying it. Uncle Simon approached, clasping my hand warmly. "You're looking well, Iris. That job in San Francisco must agree with you. Senior project manager now," I said, tasting the title like something sweet. His eyebrows shot up, and for once admiration, not pity, shone in a family member's eyes. The cracks in the old narrative widened as the evening went on. Cousin Michael admitted he had always noticed the difference in how we were treated. Aunt Martha hugged me too tightly, whispering that Dad had lost his job months ago, and Mom was on medication. When Dad finally cornered me near the bar, bourbon heavy on his breath, his voice carried less authority than before. "Family sticks together, Iris, no matter what." I met his gaze without flinching. "Do they? Or do some family members get stuck together while others get pushed aside?" His face flushed crimson. "We've always supported you." $2 in a piggy bank," I said softly. "That was your definition of support." For once he had no quick rebuttal. He opened his mouth, closed it, then turned away. Later in the restroom, Mom appeared beside me at the sink, her eyes swimming with carefully placed tears. "We miss you so much," she whispered, reaching for my hand. I rinsed the soap from my fingers and dried them slowly. "I miss who I thought you were, too." Her hand froze in midair, the practiced performance faltering. She turned away without another word. By the time dessert was served, the room hummed again with small talk, but the old hierarchy was fractured. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet shadow orbiting Chelsea's spotlight. Relatives asked me questions, directly listened to my answers, treated me as though I mattered. I sipped my champagne slowly, scanning the room. My parents huddled in a corner, whispering furiously. Chelsea stood by the terrace doors, her smile thin, her shoulders slumped. And me, I felt strangely calm, grounded in my own skin. The cracks were showing, the facade was splintering, and tomorrow at the wedding it would break wide open. The morning of the wedding broke with sunlight pouring through the tall windows of Magnolia Gardens. Bridesmaids hurried past in silk robes, laughter spilling down the hallways, but beneath it all, I felt the storm gathering. It came to a head when Aunt Martha slipped into the bridal suite and touched my arm. "Your parents are asking for you," she whispered. "They said it's important. They're waiting in the library." Of course they were. The stage was set for an ambush. 30 minutes before the ceremony, I pushed open the heavy library door. My parents sat waiting. Mom perched with tissues already clutched in her hand, Dad pacing by the fireplace. Chelsea stood near the window in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Iris, Mom said, rising as though to embrace me. "Thank God you came. We need to talk as a family." I stayed by the door. "The ceremony starts soon. You'll need to make it quick." Dad gestured toward an empty chair positioned to face them. "Sit down. This can't wait. My pulse thudded, but I didn't move closer. I'm listening. Chelsea stepped forward, her voice pitched high with urgency. Iris, this has gone far enough. Dad lost his job 3 months ago. Mom's been struggling with depression. They're selling the house. Don't you see this all started when you walked out at Christmas? The words hit like a well-aimed dart, guilt wrapped in crisis presented as my fault. 7 months ago, I would have buckled under the weight of it. Today, I crossed the room, sat down, and placed my purse on the chair beside me. Calm, deliberate. I'm sorry to hear about your job, Dad, I said evenly. And Mom, I'm glad you're getting help. But let's be clear, selling the house didn't start with me leaving. It started with choices you made long before. Dad's face flushed red, his voice booming. We've always supported you. I reached into my purse and set a leather-bound photo album on the table. Did you... Let's look together. One by one, I turned the pages. Chelsea's 5th birthday pony rides entertainers a castle cake. My 6th, a grocery store sheet cake at the kitchen table. Christmas photos with Chelsea's gifts piled high, mine barely visible. Family vacations where I was absent working summer jobs while Chelsea explored Europe. This is ridiculous, Dad snapped. Is it? I flipped again. Graduation. I was valedictorian. Those empty seats in the front row. You were at Chelsea's soccer game. You said she needed encouragement. I didn't. Mom's lips trembled. Things were different then. We didn't have the money. I cut her off, pulling a folder from my purse. Bank statements. You had the inheritance from Grandma. Dad's promotion came when I was 16. There was money. You chose not to spend it on me. Chelsea shifted uncomfortably, her arms crossed. That's not fair. You chose engineering. That was your decision. My passion, I corrected. Just like art was yours. The difference is, my passion wasn't considered worth investing in. The silence was thick, broken only by the creak of Dad's chair as he sat down heavily. Finally, I reached into my purse one last time. The plastic piggy bank made a hollow sound as I placed it on the table. My parents froze. You remember this? I asked softly. I removed the rubber stopper and tipped it upside down. Dozens of crisp $2 bills spilled across the table, sliding like green dominoes. I've saved one for every week since Christmas, not as punishment, as a reminder. This is what you thought I was worth. Chelsea picked up a bill, staring at it, as though it might burn her fingers. Her voice cracked. I never realized how it looked from your side. I never learned how to stand on my own. Mom collapsed into real tears this time, not the rehearsed kind. We never meant to hurt you. Intent doesn't erase impact, I said, rising to my feet. I don't want apologies. I want change, family therapy, respect for my boundaries. Those are the conditions. Dad opened his mouth, but Mom placed a trembling hand on his arm. We'll do it, she whispered. Whatever it takes. I gathered the album and the folder, leaving the bills scattered on the table. Keep them, I said, pausing at the door. A reminder of what happens when you value one child over another. Then I left the library, my back straight, my heart lighter than it had been in years. The ceremony began with music rising from the string quartet, each note trembling in the air like a new beginning. I sat among the rows of relatives, not between my parents, not across from Chelsea, but in a seat I had chosen for myself. The bride glided down the aisle, radiant in white, and for once I didn't feel like a ghost in my own family. I felt like a witness to something larger, a reminder that love, when true, builds instead of destroys. During the vows, my mind wandered back to the library confrontation. The photo albums, the bank statements, the piggy bank spilling $2 bills onto polished wood. For years, I had dreamed of revenge, not fire and fury, but recognition. Proof that I wasn't invisible, that the scales had never been balanced. And in that moment I realized I had already achieved it. The truest revenge was not making them suffer, but choosing to live well, to live free, to live without begging for love that should have been mine all along. In the weeks after the wedding, small changes rippled outward. My parents began attending therapy sessions. Dad started showing up at AA meetings, one 90-day chip at a time. Mom volunteered at the community center, pouring her restless energy into helping others. Chelsea, stripped of her BMW and easy bailouts, picked up 2 part-time jobs and learned perhaps for the first time what it meant to stand on her own feet. But the bigger change was in me. For so long, my worth had been tied to their approval. Their favoritism had defined me. Their neglect had scarred me. Yet as I sat in my San Francisco apartment one quiet evening, sunlight catching the pottery lining my shelves, I realized something profound. I could forgive them without excusing them. Forgiveness didn't mean pretending the past hadn't happened. It didn't mean erasing the pain or allowing the same cycles to repeat. Forgiveness meant releasing the hold those memories had over me. It meant refusing to let bitterness dictate the rest of my life. The Bible says in Proverbs 22:6, "Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it." My parents had failed in that calling. Their favoritism had carved wounds into my childhood that no apology could erase. But I wasn't a child anymore. I was an adult with the power to choose differently, to forgive, to heal, to live with compassion without allowing myself to be diminished again. Forgiveness. I learned as a choice. So is resentment. I could have spent the rest of my days tallying every slight, every missed birthday, every dollar siphoned toward Chelsea instead of me. That would have been one kind of revenge. But the deeper, truer path was choosing peace. A Western proverb says, "What is right is not always popular, and what is popular is not always right." Walking away at 2:17 a.m. on Christmas morning hadn't been popular. Relatives, whispered cousins speculated my parents painted me as cruel and ungrateful. But it was right. It was survival. And in that choice I found a new kind of strength, the courage to live my own life defined not by their favoritism, but by my freedom. The human heart longs for justice, but justice sometimes looks different than we expect. Justice can be therapy sessions in a church basement with strangers who nod in recognition. Justice can be sunlight streaming into a rent-controlled apartment pottery drying on the windowsill. Justice can be saying no to manipulation and yes to yourself. That is what I discovered. The real victory was not in proving them wrong, but in proving to myself that I was worth more than $2. 1 year after I left Portland, I stood in my kitchen carving a turkey with Elliot by my side, Monica pouring wine, friends from work laughing around a table I owned in a home I built. My phone buzzed with a video call Chelsea, her face tired but more grounded than before. She showed me a clay ornament she had made in her first pottery class. "Not pretty," she said with a sheepish smile, "but made with love. I'm mailing it to you." Minutes later, another message appeared, a photo from Mom. The old dollhouse from the attic, carefully wrapped with deed papers, transferring it officially into my name. A token of something they had never given before recognition. I felt tears rise not of pain, but of release. Maybe they were learning, maybe not. But either way, I was free. As I look back now, I realize my story is not just mine. Many of you watching have felt invisible in your own families. Many of you have carried the sting of favoritism, the ache of being overlooked while others were lifted high. Some of you are still carrying that burden. Here's what I want to say. You are worth more than what others decide to give you. Your value is not measured by the size of the gift, the applause at graduation, or the car with a red bow. Your value is intrinsic, God-given, unshakable. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it frees your future. Boundaries don't mean you don't love your family. They mean you also love yourself. These are the true revenge stories, not the ones fueled by hate, but the ones where people rise above betrayal, reclaim their dignity, and choose peace over pain. So if this story spoke to you, drop a comment and share where you're watching from. Maybe you've lived through favoritism, or maybe you're still in the middle of it. Tell us your story. And if you believe in the power of healing, forgiveness, and self-worth, hit like and subscribe. Your support means the world, and it helps bring more of these voices into the light. Because at the end of the day, the greatest revenge isn't destruction. The greatest revenge is freedom.